world is becoming more unglued by the day. Local consequences are now showing up. We are seeing sky-high gas prices, higher food prices, shortages, and more. How should you respond? Go to redpills.tv/patriot. That's redpills.tv/patriot. And secure your long-term emergency food storage from My Patriot Supply. My Patriot Supply is by far the largest preparedness company in America. They're in stock and shipping quickly in unmarked boxes to your door. Their emergency food supplies last up to 25 years in storage. When you need it, it'll be there. Lunches, dinners, drinks, and snacks totaling over 2,000 calories a day. Get free shipping on any order over $99. Again, go to redpills.tv/patriot.
From the spaceship in the sky to the simulation in the mind. Let's all embark on another journey of Conversations on the Fringe.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Josh. Welcome to the Red Pill Project's Conversations on the Fringe. This is where we take that conversation beyond the normal talk of politics, economics, and warfare, and we go into the mind and talk about the things that are really heart-pressing and that really matter, the things that are typically reserved for those fireside conversations or those conversations with friends and good buddies. But tonight, we got a returning guest, Matt Presti, coming on with us, and we're going to be talking about the one, the only, the great Walter Russell. If you don't know Matt Presti, you can find him at mattpresti.com, MATTPRESTI.com. He's a meta scientist, a musician, definitely 100% a patriot, a philosopher, poet, practitioner of the universal law, natural science, and living philosophy. Matt, man, welcome. I appreciate you coming on. We kind of saw Terrence Howard's Joe Rogan interview, and it went viral. And I'm like, I think we need to do a show on this. And I've had a few people hit me up to do a show on this. I'm like, well, I should introduce you to Matt Presti because he's probably one of the sole people in the world that has the expertise to really explain a lot of what Terrence Howard was talking about. But not only what Terrence Howard was talking about, because Terrence Howard, in my opinion, I think he kind of wasn't very articulate in the sense of how he was explaining things, or wasn't very thorough in the sense of Walter Russell's philosophy to explain a lot of the stuff to that degree. So we decided to do a show. We were hoping David Whitehead could join us, but he had other obligations tonight. Matt, what's up, man?
Brother, it is good to be back. I'm alive, doing good. All is well in the world, despite being on the verge of World War III and atomic suicide. Which is a Russell book title, by the way. Yeah, doing well, man. It's great to be back.
Awesome. So let's just jump right into it. Talk to me about your thoughts on Terrence Howard and kind of the revelations he's having and the Joe Rogan podcast.
You got it. Terrence, I met once. He came out to speak at one of our homecomings for the University of Science and Philosophy, formerly the Walter Russell Foundation. Philosophy.org, if you guys want to check that out. So we were holding conferences again after a 20-year hiatus. All the artwork and stuff went into storage. And Terrence came gratefully to take part in the conference. I'm acquainted with Terrence. Do I know him? No, not necessarily, but I can say from what I experienced of his demeanor, he's a good man to me, it seems, and just likable guy. We were hanging out, shooting the shit, having a good time, and he gave a presentation on a lot of the topics that he covered in the Rogan interview. He comes from his own angle on a lot of this stuff, as a lot of people do who study um, people with alternative ideas, you could say. You always have differences of people, not just in the astrological world, but we're all born under different signs and with different circumstances. But we all also bring our own sort of flair or twist to certain things we study. And his is really, I think, a universal one, which is Walter Russell's first science book written in 1926. He tends to mostly extrapolate the ideas out of that book. One major difference between that book and Russell's last science book called Atomic Suicide, question mark, Drenched in Blood, are the letters of that book, written in 1957. The major difference is that it's 40 years of maturation of his concepts. And so that's the work that I mostly focus on, is his last iteration of his science. It's not to discredit the Universal One, which was a beautiful book in which the Catholic Church threatened, the Pope threatened to issue a decree against Walter if he ever reprinted that book. So that's why there were only 1,000 copies ever printed until the year 1973, I think, or four, when Leo, his surviving spouse, decided to reprint that book in full. And thankfully she did, because that's probably the best seller of the university. There's been a great increase in book sales, so that really helped us out. And just as far as Terrence goes, he presented a lot of stuff. Again, it's his own takes. I don't agree with all of it, but nobody agrees with anybody 100%, as you know. But I thought he did rather well. I was really happy to hear him mention Walter Russell in such a format, because I've been working 15 years very hard to try to get the man's work out there. Not only that, I delivered his artwork back to the world stage, along with a dedicated group of people, small group of individuals. And so that was accomplished. And there's a footprint for his work on display in Waynesboro, Virginia, for the world to see. And I think they're working on trying to get Terrence for the next homecoming. So Terrence, if you catch this, I'll call the university and come back and speak at the homecoming in September. It'd be the 28th, weekend of the 28th. And that'll be in Waynesboro, Virginia, philosophy.org.
Fantastic. And philosophy.org, by the way, if anybody is looking to get Walter Russell's books, we created a quick link for you, redpills.tv/Walter, WALTER. You can go to that link, redpills.tv/Walter. We're going to be talking a lot about Walter Russell tonight. You can use the code REDPILL20. And that should, I think that's 20% off, Matt. Is that correct?
That's correct. All books and booklets, 20% off. So you'll save quite a little bit.
Fantastic. So for everybody out there, keep that in mind. It is in the description boxes below of wherever you are watching this stream, whether it's YouTube, which we are back on YouTube for now. I'm excited about that.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. I saw your YouTube link. I was surprised.
Yeah, I started out with this show. And the first one I went on live on YouTube on this show, Fringe, it got blocked. And I was like, oh, God, this is one of these things. But I actually appealed it because it was on the Netflix TV show, Three Body Problem. And we used promotional videos on YouTube for the video that we did on YouTube. And YouTube blocked that, saying we were copyrighted. And I was like, I'm using your own videos that are not. Like, so they lifted it, and that was good. And they've been really good with the disputes, and I've had no problem. So I'm excited to be back on YouTube. If for anybody out there, if you caught this on social media and you saw the various different links, please do go on over to that YouTube channel, click that, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And Matt, you got a YouTube channel as well. You put out a podcast, Tech Talk, right?
Yeah, Tech Talk is the short form of the Tech Podcast, which is the 2-hour version. Tech Talk is a 1-hour version on average. So,
gotcha. And that's on YouTube, or where's the best way to
it's actually on Rumble. I didn't want to post on YouTube because I just didn't want to deal with the hassle, and I like having the ability to just say whatever is on my mind or the guest's mind without worrying about being discriminated against for having unpopular opinions, you could say.
Right. Well, jumping into it. So Terrence Howard talked a lot about kind of his own derivation of mathematics. And by the way, if Terrence is watching this, I'm not attacking you, Terrence. I just said, Terrence, I thought that a few things that you said were maybe not extrapolated correctly. I understand completely where you're coming from on a lot of your theories. And I don't disagree with you on a lot of that stuff. Some of the things I think that it would be open for debate and discussion, and I think that'd be a fantastic discussion. But Matt, why don't you give us a little bit about the philosophy of Walter Russell? Maybe a little bit about his history and then just his philosophy, and we can jump right into it.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm getting better at this as I go along, but I'm certainly no expert in the science, although I'm learning quite a lot. It's literally a science that you could say will change the world when the other sciences adopt his approaches and his understands the basics of it. But for the most part, and I coined this term today in an earlier interview, it's a creator centric science, meaning God is at the center of it.
Mm.
And you could literally call his university the University of God if you wanted to, because it teaches his natural science as it was given to him in divine illumination. It's a two-way motion universe. It takes into account the syntropic or compressive force of nature, which is invisible to the senses of man. That's why we only have a one-way heat, death, dying, explosion only physics model of creation, which also happens to consign God to a death sentence when the universe blinks out from freezing after it's moved too far away to retain any sort of heat, which is kind of a ludicrous thing. There's no accounting for the inhalation process of nature. And as you know, your own body inhales and your hemispheres unite in that inhalation and exhale at 90 degrees, the heat. So that's pretty much the whole science. Is it's a two-way motion universe of opposites and takes all the opposites into consideration: compression, expansion, gravitation, radiation. Of course, cold generates, heat radiates. These are just some of the examples of the terminology that we'll get into more. But on the base, it's a creator-based science, creator-centric. And one of my favorite quotes he ever said about modern science, the materialist science, is that the cardinal error of science lies in shutting the creator out of his own creation. And that's where they really deviated from reality. And going down the railroad tracks, the tracks don't meet in the horizon. And so science is heavily mired in the senses and sense-based conclusions, and the everything's quantifiable and reduced, to nuts and bolts, basically, parts and particles. All of Russell science is a wave science, a wave of creation, and the wave of creation has basically a dual purpose: life and death. So there's a charging up of life and a discharge toward death. And we do that every day cyclically. We wake up charged, we burn down our charge during the day with action and work, and then we discharge. So we have to recharge by laying down at 90 degrees and charging up again while we sleep. And then we discharge the next day. So we're like batteries, human batteries, but everything in nature pretty much is cyclical in that way. And he takes very much nature into regard when he presents his work as well.
It's interesting that you're talking about a lot of this, because you go to Victor Schallenberger, you go to Nikola Tesla, you go to all these greats out there that talked about these various different concepts, and their principles and their ideas and their inventions and their philosophies all derive from the observation of nature, which is exactly what you're talking about here. Now, you just talked about how Walter Russell described it in this sense of this dualistic waveform. It's very interesting. It's kind of very similar to the Vedic philosophy. The Vedic philosophy has this dualistic tendency. It goes into the aspect of Western philosophy and religions with the trivium, the Trinity, in the sense that the two dualistic tendencies come together to form a third emergent effect, emergent phenomena, and this emergent phenomena is only existent because of the primary and the secondary that come together. The convergence, the divergence, the ebb and the flow, the breathe in, the breathe out, the fire and the water. We can look at it in so many different ways. But when you were talking there, a lot of my research has been done on galactic cycles, how galactic cycles fit into who and what we are and the evolutionary cycle. And I 100% agree with you that we go through daily, hourly cycles, daily cycles. We go through weekly cycles. We go through yearly cycles within our own life and within our own body. Our skin, it sheds off every 7 days and replenishes itself. These are various different cycles that bring about this ebb and flow. But then we have higher level cycles like the precessional cycles. Every 2,160 years, we switch this transition of this wobble of our planet in the elliptic, and we move into a different galactic age, as it's called. And I always looked at the ancients when they talked about this, or they anthropomorphized it through mythology or whatever, that they were trying to tell us something more and deeper. And so I started looking into this, and what I started to discover was that our planet, our solar system, as it moves through the galaxy, it bounces up and down. And it goes through the galactic arm, and it goes through points of high density, and then it goes through a new point of polarization and above the galactic arm, and then it goes below the galactic arm. And I said, wow, if I was to observe that outside of the galaxy, I would have an analemma, which is kind of the observant. If I looked at the sun every day in the sky and I put a dot on a window, I would have that figure 8 that forms, which is an analemma, and that's the rotation periodicity around the star. Where if I looked at that through the galaxy, I would have the same analemma. Then I came across this research, and this is phenomenal because it actually validates a lot of what Walter Russell said. This article was from 2020, and it was observations on stellar nurseries within the Milky Way galaxy. And what they discovered is that stellar nurseries are not independent in the galaxy or in galactic arms, that they all formulate and ride what they call a Radcliffe wave, which is a big sine wave, that stellar nurseries all form on this waveform that bounces up and down through the galactic arm. And I said, well, that's really interesting. So stellar nurseries do that and they form stars. But what happens after the stars form? They don't just stop oscillating in this Radcliffe wave, which means that we go through these processes on the galactic level of birth and death. Of the stellar nebulas come in through this wave of birth, and they go out through this wave of death, and it also goes through this transition of positive and negative through the various different polarities of the galaxy. It goes through points of high density, low density, very similar to summer and winter in the sense of the immortalization of death. And so I find that fascinating that Walter Russell was talking about that he knew this information, and he discussed it to a very high and large level and degree back then. And these are things that we're finding out today.
Yeah, he was well ahead of his time. He knew things cosmically that most scientists on the earth at that time had no idea about. His charts on chemistry too, and yeah, everything is what you're saying earlier about the ebb and flow and the cycles within cycles. It reminds me of the song "Natural Science" by Rush. He says, Neil Peart wrote, "Wheels within wheels in a spiral array, a pattern so grand and complex. Time after time, we lose sight of the way our causes can't see their effects." But yeah, it's a beautiful, badass tune. If you like Rush, check it out. Yeah, it is wheels within wheels, literally cycles within cycles. Some are on the grand level, some are on the experiential daily level here, and even smaller ones at the cellular level. Different, as you could say, astrology has mapped a lot of this stuff out. It's very ancient science. Of course, astronomy is like astrology 2.0, you could say, only with a more materialistic bent. But yeah, it's incredible. I'd say the big cycles are subject to seasons just like the small ones, but it's a grand season versus a local season, you could say. So yeah, if you're going up and down, and one of the interesting things Walter said, and this is what gives flat earthers a lot of pause if they look into it, but that all of space is not a vacuum. It's filled with 3 octaves of fully toned elements called the space gases, which does away with the need for an ether model. I know ether's making a comeback, guys, but you don't need it. He actually has names for each of these elements, 2 of which were deuterium and tritium because they precede hydrogen. But unlike current science calls all these elements, and they are only aware of just a couple, or 3 or 4 maybe. I have to look into it again to see how much more they've discovered. But Walter gave them literally 21 elements that precede hydrogen, or 23 in the three octaves prior to hydrogen. And they falsely call them isotopes when they're actually fully toned elements. In other words, an isotope you could think of as like a black key on the piano versus a major key, which is the white key. So that's just one way to look at it from a tonal pressure condition. But you get more isotopes the further out you go from carbon into the death half of the wave. And the wave of creation in Russell science, it's important to note that the first half of the wave up to carbon, all elements are closing their holes tighter and tighter as they approach carbon. And when they pass carbon, the hole begins to open up. So carbon's really the only closed hole element, which is true cube and sphere. And it's also the perfect balance of male and female. It has a 3,600 degree melting point, highest melting point of any element. And it's got 10 million known chemical bonds. And it really is the God particle, which is why they have this war on carbon. So just think about it. But yeah, the grand cycles, man, it's really amazing. And the ancient arts, the ancient civilizations and ancient sciences were very aware of a lot of these things, incorporated it into their, ritual, into their observances of, different days of the year, especially concerning the sun, because that is another huge thing that we can get into. But yeah, it's really just an amazing thing.
Absolutely. And I believe this is a look at the wave periodic table from Walter Russell. This is the same one that Terrence Howard was talking about. And it talks about, and I know this, the resolution is not very great, guys, so I apologize. But alphanon, you have betanon, gammanon, and then you go into hydrogen, helium, and that starts around the 3rd and the 4th octave, which is really it. Oh, the 1st octave right here is where hydrogen starts. But
hydrogen is on your 3rd octave, 3rd and a half.
Yep, there it is. Yep.
So everything prior to that, I think it's 24 elements are in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd and a half octave.
Now, it was interesting because I took to Twitter or X, and I was watching the ridicule that was coming from traditional scientists towards Terrence Howard. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest ones that I saw was directed towards the periodic table of elements. And it was interesting because it was a known quantum physicist, theoretical physicist, who has his own podcast, and he's published multiple papers. And he starts ridiculing Terrence Howard about the periodic table and how, this guy thinks that elements have frequencies. Ha, 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 ha. And I'm sitting there going, what the hell is this guy talking about?
Right.
I mean, has this man ever heard of a magnetic resonance imager, like an MRI machine? Like the whole quantum magnetic resonance is the reason why we know about this. Like the oscillation of the protons of the nucleus of an atom is the reason why MRIs actually work, and like why the majority of our imaging at that quantum level actually works and operates. And I mean, everything has a frequency. If anything is occupying space, that thing has a certain type of frequency, and we can calculate that by taking the radius of that nucleus and then deriving the frequency from that through F equals 1/T. And so, it was just absolutely mind-boggling. And even during the Manhattan Project in the 1920s and the 30s, well, the 1930s and the 1940s, the frequency of the various elements and atoms and the oscillational periodicity, as well as the resonant structure, was critically important in understanding how energy is derived through E equals mc squared. And so I was commenting on some of these, but I got like paragraphs in, and I'm just like, I can't do this. I'm going to be here all day if I start arguing with physicists. But I find it incredibly ignorant of modern science to ignore these types of things when it's actually published science. And it goes back to the idea, the occult idea of the nescient versus the ignorant. I mean, do these people just not know?
Yeah, it's a good question. Can I share screen? Is that an option?
Yep, you should be able to.
Okay, I want to show you some of the earliest photographs from electron microscope microscopy by Erwin Mueller. And let me see here. Okay. So these are some really cool ones, but he shows us here there's no nucleus.
Hmm.
The only atom with a nucleus that's a solid particle is carbon. Everything else has a hole in the center, which is very interesting, but it's just to show you that how come we're not showing these pictures to science classes at
Right.
universities? Why are we still using ball-studded models? And this is incredible, you know. So these are some of the things. If you look up Erwin Mueller and the tungsten atom photographs, he literally has hundreds of these in his book on field microscopy, which was published in the 50s. But what it actually is telling us here too is that if the atom is hollow in the middle, then what really is going on? And it closes, the hole closes as you come up that wave that you showed. And that spiral wave, think of it from looking down at it, it would look like a spiral in this direction. Versus what Russell did was he turned it and stretched it out. But it's actually three-dimensional spiral, like you're looking down into a tornado. And the tighter it gets, that's your matter becoming more and more compressed. And the more it compresses, the faster it throws off rings. So when you get out to plutonium, uranium, and plutonium, you're throwing off 92, 93 rings from the nucleus. So really, what you have is a protonic movement from the very first octave up to carbon, which is 4.5, and that's the closing hole compression. And then beyond that, you have expansion overtakes compression and begins to unwind the center even faster. So protonic is an inward compressive movement. Electronic is the outward expansive movement, which ejects at the equator. Much like you throw a stone in the water. It's not a particle spinning around the stone. It's a ring given off because it's a wave, not a particle. Science sees these rings around these atoms and they think it's a particle moving really fast around it. But it's actually a ring like you would see on the surface of water.
Right. It's a ripple. It's a ripple or oscillation due to the force of convergence that's being developed by the minute vortex that is created.
Right. And
And
if it's a ring, as you said, then it's got a frequency, right? If it's a
that's right.
ripple, it has a frequency because it's a wave. All waves are frequencies. So when they say that, oh, elements don't have frequency, they don't have any idea what they're talking about.
I agree. They have no idea what they're talking about. And, you know, when we start looking at nature, it starts to make a lot more sense. I mean, we look at the spiral shape of a galaxy. We look at a hurricane. We look at a tornado. We look at a vortex. We look at a torus. We start looking at the nature all around us. We start looking at magnetic vortices, right? These are all showing us the shape of what the quantum world actually looks like. Is that if you wanted to get an idea of what it would be, is think about a hurricane that is spiraling around itself in a vortex. That would be your nucleus. And then all of the oscillations that are occurring outside of that would be your electron field, the ripples that are permeating I would call it the ether, but the permeability field, right? So nature shows us so much of what is actually going on in our universe, in our world. And I don't think there needs to be very complex explanations of this that require, 8 years of study at a university and high level derivative mathematics, which deals with massive amounts of statistics and probabilities, which are basically non-existent in the universe. I mean, it's absurd, and I think that that is one of the big things that is going to transition here in the next hopefully 10 years
Yeah,
is that science is going to learn that what we're dealing with is not materialism coming into existence through accidents and happenstance, but instead we live in a highly conscious universe, and that consciousness is fundamental and basic to the whole existence of our nature.
absolutely. Yeah, you said it very well there. And take the hurricane example. What's at the center of every hurricane? What do they call that?
The calm, the
The
eye.
eye, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing there in the middle. It's stillness. It's massless. There's nothing there. So just like a giant atom on a giant scale, it would be like a hurricane, empty in the middle. But you locate the creator by locating the motion that spins around the stillness. As Beethoven said, the create God was in between the notes,
Mm,
in the silence between the notes. So even in matter, there's stillness and silence at the center of pretty much every kind of element, excepting again carbon, because it's the only fusion particle that is closed whole in true cube and sphere, which is the model of Russell science. But so yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, there's always the fulcrum is very important in Russell science because it's the basis for what is the power source. You know, all power is at 90 degrees to motion. So our motion of our body here moves on the fulcrum of our joining of the two hemispheres. And so you have three. You have your left, your right hemisphere, and then the fulcrum that holds the two together. And the power comes from the fulcrum. The power is not in the seesaw. It's not in the door. It's in the door jamb. It's in the the fulcrum under the seesaw that, you know, creates the motion that we call
right.
waves and particles and everything else. So just important to note that always pay attention to what's not moving, and you'll actually locate the creator. And that's how you start to know that, well, that's what stillness means. Be still and know that I am God, right? Doesn't say do jumping jacks, you know, raise your vibration. That's ludicrous, you know. And it's funny to me because a lot of the new age drivel that's out there about raising your vibration and, you know, all this stuff, but and they say fear is a low vibration. You ever seen somebody scared to death running down the street, scared, screaming at the top of their lungs? Is that a low vibration, guys? Come on, that's about as high a vibration as you can get. You ever see an angry guy break somebody's face open? That's a high vibration. A fever is a high vibration. Ultraviolet light, which burns white people to death. If you've ever been on the beach too long with your shirt off, you know what I'm talking about. That's a high vibration. So really, what you want to do, again, inversion is the signature of Satanism. You want to lower your vibration. Be still and know that I'm God. And when you operate from a point of stillness, your power increases. Your potential for power is 50 times more than it would be normally, you know. So that's just one caveat to throw in there. But yeah, a giant hurricane is like a giant atom. It's empty in the middle, but the motion moves around it. And it's also the stillness bounds all motions. So I wish I had a ring magnet and some magnet paper. I should have brought that up from the lab, but you can take a magnet, a ring magnet, and you can see the white block wall around the outside of the ring and around the inside of the ring. That's God. You're literally looking at the creator right there. So the block wall of a magnet or a bar magnet is even, you know, proof that the creator is the center line between all hemispheres, and all bodies in motion are doubly charged. They have they have hemispheres, right? Everybody from insect to man to sun to galaxy, it's all hemispherical.
So, not necessarily Russell's perspective, but so what are your perspectives then on the primacy of consciousness? What are your ideas in the sense of what consciousness is? I just mentioned there that it's foundational to the universe, or at least that's what I believe. What are your thoughts?
Well, I've always kind of felt like consciousness was causal, going back a very long way in my research, which began in 1998. I read a lot of books on what people thought consciousness was, but until I encountered Russell, I really didn't have I'd say a way to really explain or a, a Rosetta Stone that I could really clarify what it was I knew. And until I encountered his Secret of Light book and began to read more of his works, and I'm typing in something here to
Mhm.
bring up another share screen real quick just to show what I think is a great image to understand here. And I will share the screen in just a moment. So yeah, consciousness is all there is really, and it's at 90 degrees tall motion as well. It's dead center of the brain, you could say, and our thinking is an oscillation and a frequency. So there is a frequency to fear, there is a frequency to anger, and the oscillation, like a seesaw, moves on the fulcrum, which is pure consciousness.
Mhm.
And so I'll go ahead and hit the share here, and let's pull up a couple of these images are really cool. I want to get one that's got a lot of resolution here. So there we go. And basically, you're seeing an inverted galaxy picture or inverted galaxies in space. And I thought to do this because in one of Russell's images, he says that space is the one white light of mind,
Mm.
more or less, and it's the God mind. And so if you invert space and or a galaxy photo or photo of space and galaxies, etc., you'll see the white light surrounding everything. It's in and through everything, literally. And this is the omnipresence of the creator. I like to say if God was to take a selfie with a cell phone, there it is. You're looking at it.
Did that picture blow up? All we got is just the small.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see here. Oh, I know why that is. Yeah.
I'm probably opening a new window.
Yeah. Stop sharing and share the right picture, son. And I'm sorry, guys. I'll get you there. There we go. How's that? That a little better?
Perfect.
Yep. So that's basically, and if you just type in inverted galaxy, go to a search engine, there's hundreds of them. You can take your favorite photo of space of, you know, any galaxy, whatever, and you invert it yourself with a Photoshop software or whatever. And you can see that the white light is in and through everything. And that's why in the illumination experience, they have what are called flashes of light. And I'm going to cancel these. Is the sharing over?
Yep.
Okay, great. So the white light experience is literally a flash of illumination. You're literally when you get chills, right? Because someone says something that's really true, and it just hits you, and you get the chills. That's because you're close to God at that moment.
Hmm.
God is the absolute cold zero curvature, and consciousness itself. Again, it is the reason that everything exists. And Russell was more like an idealist, you could say, than he was a materialist. And they basically look at mind as being causal, matter and effect, where our materialists or physicalist philosophers, which are the scientists of today, they believe that matter is causal and mind is an effect of matter. And I can prove in one sentence that that's not true. Everything man made is evidence that first the mind must create, and then you have to build the body for it. So I
Right.
enter exhibit A, 65 trillion man made things that you can look at all around you right now, you know, all over the planet. There's evidence right there that what comes, the mind, the idea comes to the mind first, then the product comes from the hands of man that you have to build that idea into a physical form.
It's interesting. I do I do this exercise occasionally if I'm on a long drive or whatnot. I call it conversations with myself. But what I do is I imagine like I'm talking or debating Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
And I'll say, so Neil, you're an atheist. You know, what are your beliefs on this or that or this or that? And I'll go inside my head and I'll be my own devil's advocate, and I will basically ridicule, criticize everything that I'm saying. And there was one thing that I said, you know, what if I could prove to you that there is a God? And it was exactly around that boundary right there. And I said, you know, Neil, in my mind, I said, Neil, if there was one word you could extrapolate from all the religions and spiritual philosophies in the world that we could just call it in the sense of God, what would that one word be? And in my mind, it comes back and says, well, they look at it as the creator of all things. And I said, okay, well, the creator creates. So, around us right now, we have all of these things that were created things all around me in my room right now. Everything that I look at, everything that I see was once an idea in somebody's mind that came into reality through action. And you'd be like, yeah, that's true. And I'd be like, okay, now go outside the nature. Did nature create the trees? Did nature create the grass? The genetic code that derives the trees and the grass and the ants and the wasp and the honeybees, that evolved. But evolution, as in your perspective, scientific perspective, is creation. It's forged over time. It's not something that happens instantaneously, but it's forged through creation. So are those created things? And you go, well, yeah, those are created things. Nature creates that. I said, okay, well, let's go down to the molecular level. And now we got atoms that come together, and atoms come together and they form base molecules, and molecules come together and they form amino acids and then proteins. And I said, did nature create those things? Was it the forces of nature in operation that brought those things about? And he goes, well, yeah. And I said, well, those are created things. I said, well, let's go down to the quantum level. We go down to the quantum level and you have atoms. Now, if everything holds true for the molecular, for the macro, and the cosmological, then it's got to hold true for the quantum level. That nature, the quantum nature of the universe, brought those things about. And we know that the majority of the atoms that are in our solar systems and throughout the universe were created in the bellies of stars. So stars, through their process and through their interactions and forces, produced atoms. He goes, well, yeah. So I said, those are created things. Let's take it now a step further down. Let's go to the Planck's length. Let's go to the theoretical. And now we have oscillations of wave patterns on the Planck's length that formulate together and resonate together to form subatomic particles. And I said, so shouldn't the same nature hold true? And he goes, well, yeah. And I said, well, what was the one thing on our human level that was a derivative of all of the things created? Mind. And so shouldn't that hold true for all those levels below and above? And it's an unarguable point because it has to be that. It has to be that mind derives all things, that mind brings about the existence of all things. And what mind is that? It's the mind of the creator.
There you go. The very word poiesis means the act of creation, which is the Greek root of the word poetry or poem or poet. It's one who can create something that's never existed before. And it's the very act itself. So, which is a fine art, by the way. Yeah, that's fantastic. The mind really is, as Russell would say, it centers all cells, corpuscles, and bounds all motions as well. So go back to the inverted galaxy picture. That light doesn't just stop. It's not just in space. It's through you, through me, through everyone in the audience. Every cell and corpuscle of your being is centered by that divine white light and bounded by it. It's not visible to our human eyes, though. What we see is the color spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this mind, literally, that's why Russell's science is termed by him. Number one, he's a meta scientist, not a metaphysicist or metaphysics. It's meta science, which is how do you know what you know?
Right.
And it's really getting into what is knowing, even more than some of the other studies you could say. But a mind wave universe literally is just that. Mind is the perturber, and when it divides, it creates the color spectrum. So why is it white? I'm sure the audience probably wonders, why is it white? Well, why is a movie screen white? Because it's the only color that will reflect the color spectrum. You couldn't see a galaxy if space was white. You couldn't see anything if everything was white. So the divided white light, consciousness divides into the twin opposing conical motions that we see all around in nature. As above, so below. It's all one seamless motion and process, which Russell nailed through his own divine illumination. And when you have a divine illumination, inspiration is a miniature divine illumination. And we've all been inspired. And I like to tell people, when you get inspired, keep it going, because you're really close to the creator at that point. And the creator is you, to the degree that you realize it is how much power you're able to express. And that's why some people get termed geniuses, because they're connected to that power source within them. Genius doesn't come from going to the store and buying a book. There's no knowledge in a library. It's just a bunch of symbols. And when you read them, it awakens and helps you recollect something you've known inside your mind. We don't learn from books. We learn from recollection of what's already existent, because all knowledge in the universe is existent. We just have to recollect it within our minds. When we read the words, symbols, if you read a book in Japanese, would you get anything out of it? No, of course not, because you can't speak Japanese, and neither can I. Unless you do, and I'm not insulting you. I'm just saying, people out there, generally, we read English books. But if somebody can't interpret the symbols, thankfully we can, and we translate. What we're doing is translating that knowledge in the library inside our mind, recalling it, and then we are able to utilize it at that point. But it doesn't happen in the book. It's not in the book. That's the beauty of it. So all knowledge really does exist, and it can be ours for the asking. And that's the beauty of it. And the white screen, I mean, that when Goethe demonstrated his color wheel of the 7 major colors and he spun it, guess what color it turned?
White.
White. Why is that? Why does a prism divide into the color spectrum only with white light? So there it is. I mean, mind is the white light. And when you have, check it out, an idea or an inspiration, what is that symbolized by? A light bulb over your head.
Right.
Okay. A flash. How many people have had actual flashes? You know what a flash is? And an illumination that can last days for some people, or weeks. Like for Russell, it lasted 39 days on his 49th birthday. But basically, scientifically defined, an illumination is a short circuit of the hemispheres of the brain, an electrical short circuit. And that short circuit is what creates that flash of light. So when you go, aha, I've got an idea, you just had a flash take place.
Huh. It's interesting, too, to think about it like that. The word inspire, etymologically, I had to look it up. Is to fill the mind and the heart with grace, also to promote or induce someone to do something, from the old French inspire or inspire, to blow into, breathe upon, figuratively inspire, excite, inflame, from in or the pi root n to spire, or to breathe. So breathe, the word breathe, inspire is where we get the word spirit, right? As well as the word inspire comes from this, to take in through the breath, which is just beautiful, because it kind of resonates with Walter Russell's work in the sense of the ebb and the flow, the breathe in and the breathe out, the contraction and the extraction. So it's kind of interesting when you start looking at the etymology of words. I find them fascinating sometimes.
Yeah, you're inspired, you're in the spirit, in the spiral, centering it, and the motion moves around you, and that's why geniuses can do what they do. I know there's a comment I just read, somebody mentioned, don't go into the light. I just completely think that's about, oh my, let's just say, I wouldn't listen to that myself. I think it's a sort of a black pill kind of outlook, but and there's lots of reasons for that. But if you haven't ever read a Russell or encountered the work of the man, you would do well to read The Secret of Light, so that you understand that the 2 kinds of light in this universe are the light of the spirit, which is white, undivided, unconditioned, sexless. It is the one, of which all our lights are part of that light. And that light is the light of the spirit, or the soul, you could say. And there's a lot of words in Russell's science that are synonymous: God, truth, power, love, capital L light, stillness, silence, all of these are synonymous words, and they all mean the creator, more or less.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just and the beauty of the near death experience, and there's thousands of them where people go, and they see this light and they feel the most eternal peace and love you could ever imagine. And so, yeah, we do. The Russell science is the science explaining how matter emerges from space and then returns to it, and the way that the sacred geometrical way that it happens. It is a absolutely pure and sort of secret science, you could say, and it is thoroughly natural. It can be held right up against the mirror of nature, and it aligns in every way, shape, and form with it.
So if people were interested in Walter Russell and they were going to just go grab a book, and we got the links down there, they can use that code RedPill20, redpills.tv/Walter. What are the books that you recommend?
I would say if you're more into the science, the universal one is of course what some people consider as magnum opus. There's of course The Secret of Light, a new concept of the universe. If you're more really like a scientist who wants to read Walter Russell and you're conflicted, start with a new concept of the universe. And then the last maturation book, which is his revised concepts over 40 years, will be found in Atomic Suicide, which unfortunately is currently out of print, but it's due for a reprint and will be available in a few months. So, and if you're into the philosophy side of things more, God Will Work With You But Not For You by Leo Russell is a wonderful book. You have The Message of the Divine Iliad, Volume 1 and 2, which is Russell's commentary with his 39,000 words that he wrote down during that 39-day illumination in 1921, May of 1921, which happened to coincide with the coronal mass ejection of the sun. And then there's the home study course is like a great combination of both. For $250, you can get a course that is life-changing. It's a 1-year home study course on universal law, natural science, and living philosophy.
Do you think that's what
And
Terrence Howard did?
I don't know if, I don't know that he did the home study course, but yeah, it's, there's a lot of cool stuff, but Universal One was more of Terrence's, favorite book as far as I know.
So tell me, what do you got going on these days? What projects are you working on? How is the tech podcast going? And what are you what are the things you're learning about?
Well, it's an interesting time. I'm doing a lot of work around the house that I've been neglecting for a few years because I travel a lot when I work, and I'll just say that doing the podcast is a great thing. I'll have to have you on, bro. You're definitely on my list. But yeah, just doing the tech talk and main tech podcast has been really just a good experience because it's my exploration of consciousness on a personal level and things I'm interested in. And, the 2-hour podcast is more of stuff I research, like full book readings and stuff that I take a lot of time to put together. Just did the homesteading life conference, Doug and Stacy off grid. That was my 20th episode. That's a really good one. And there's just a lot of good ones on there. And then the tech talk is more just, I can grab somebody the same day and let's have a talk about whatever, and it's more of a fireside chat. But I'm doing really good. I'm still working Universal Power, which is energy research technology. Just really cool stuff like that. And we're, trying to work on making some things like solar power more efficient, stuff like that. And having some good results, and we're going to be going to market with something solar product wise soon that's pretty close to 97.9% efficient.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yep.
I mean, my neighbor was asking me, he's like, thinking about solar. And I'm like, yeah, you pay a 20-year loan back to these people, which is as much as your electric bill. And then the technology's obsolete once you own it and you just have to upgrade again. I said, it's a horrible deal. I said, we're going to be heading into an era where that technology is radically going to transform this planet in the sense of solar panels and other types of alternative energies. So I'm like, just wait, give it 10 years and come back and revisit it. Did Walter Russell ever talk about anything in the sense of inventions, free energy, or any of these things?
Yeah, at the Russell Museum, there's two of his conical coils that he built, which each weigh about 250 pounds a piece, I'd say. At least they feel that heavy when you're moving them around. They basically start as wide bases, like a cone, and they basically gradually get smaller in their turns as they step down. So it's more like, you know, and it compresses down. And what that does, it takes the electricity like a tornado. It's wide at the top. And as it winds down to a spiral, much like you see the Russell science too, it's really an electric universe, electric optic universe is the way he would describe the universe. And that's the only force is electricity, which creates optical effects. So the sun is electric. And when you take a magnifying glass, convex lens, and you hold it to a leaf at just the right distance, you're focusing that expanded light into a point which burns and creates heat. That's how nature produces its electricity, by winding up space into a point, and then that point expands at 90 degrees. So the conical coils, they start with electricity on each side, and as it winds up to a point, the water would run through that point in the center of those coils, and it would evaporate, and the steam would turn a steam turbine. So that's how he powered his palace for 30 days, is what the rumor is. I, of course, wasn't alive during that time, so I can't confirm or deny it, but I'll say that it was exciting to discover his coils and actually see that he was working on it. There's a great video I will send over to you, Josh, if I can find the link to it. I
Sure.
want to finish this point real quick before I go searching for something. So yeah, he did in fact make, and he also met with NORAD. He met with Army intelligence officers as a patriot in the 60s when he was 90 years old. He wanted to give something that would help the U.S. government to stop missile attacks from coming into the country. It was back in an age where a lot of people, and of course, Russell wasn't a dingbat too. He wasn't at all. He wrote about how communism was the greatest threat to America in 1953 in his book, The Scientific Answer to Human Relations. He and Leo wrote that together about how the foundations of our government were being gnawed away at by communist termites, and how important it was to, make sure that we get the communists out of our government before they cause the collapse of it. Look at us today. So this is 1953. This is years before Jordan Maxwell, even, or Edward
G. Griffin, yeah.
G. Griffin. So they were hip to it, and they were staunchly, they really loved the country and they wanted it to succeed, but they wanted it to be well defended, where they wouldn't have to fight wars, but rather could protect themselves from any kind of attack. And so that's why he met with the officials from NORAD. He really felt that, patriotic sense that he could help, do things for the military and things like that. And he wasn't pro really anything, I'd say, like necessarily. He never served in the military or anything like that, but he did love his country.
Awesome. So Terrence Howard, going back to this, do you have any critiques of maybe the things that he said? He talked about this weird mathematical trick, and I went and looked at his thesis on this. And this is one things that he got heavily ridiculed on. And for everybody out there, Terrence Howard was talking about 1 × 1 = 2, that you can never have something times another thing and have it equal just one thing. And he's talking about multiplication. He goes, but the problem, what he was describing in the sense of what we traditionally known as mathematics, is that you have a quantification and you have a multiplier. anything times one is always going to be itself, because I look at it as sets, is that you have a quantification, let's just say the number 5, and then you have a repeating of that quantification. So you have one set of 5. If there's only one 5, 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times
Right.
1 is 1. You only have one set of 1. And he was trying to extrapolate in the sense of nature's division and nature's multiplication. And I understood where he was going with that. I mean, if you take cell division, one cell goes through meiosis or mitosis, it splits into 2 cells. And this is the aspect that he was going at. But I think his theory, his theoretical analysis, his dissertation he wrote, as well as the conceptualization of it, I think was completely wrong in the sense of the take on modern mathematics. What are your thoughts?
Well, let's do a little experiment. And I've always wondered that, because he said the same thing at the homecoming in 2017, and it kind of threw a lot of people for a loop. We're like, well, sort of like, but the way he comes at it is you have one earbud, right?
Mm-hmm.
Times one earbud. How many earbuds do you see?
Well, 2.
Okay, that's how he comes at it. But if you have one earbud by itself times itself, how many do you have?
1.
Right. So it's true both ways.
Right.
And you could say, and use the example of a penny. You have one penny, and if you multiply anything by itself times itself, you've only got 1. But if you multiply 1 penny and 1 penny, or 1 earbud and 1 earbud, you have 2. If they're 2 itselfs.
But that's not multiplication. That then is
That's addition.
But that's all multiplication is. Multiplication is
that's
an
what I
expanded
think
form of addition.
That's what I think he's thinking, if that makes sense.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is that that thought process that he was bringing about, in my mind, was wrong, because multiplication is simply an expanded form of addition. The universe itself doesn't multiply, it adds. It only can add or subtract. You can only do a positive or negative. It can only add or take away. It can't multiply en masse. Anything that's multiplying is simply a higher level of addition that it's doing. Right. So
that's a good way to put it. It does work if you think of it that way, for sure.
Right. So, I mean, what he was talking about in the sense of 1 times 1, when we're talking about mathematics, you have to have certain laws, rules, and principles in place. And I think that what he was trying to do is extrapolate how nature creates out of that understanding. And I agree with him. I'm not disagreeing with what he was saying. I'm saying that the way he was explaining it was really confusing the people. And if people even read his dissertation, it was really confusing. And mathematically, it was a logical fallacy of what he was doing. And I think it really kind of hurt, in my opinion, it kind of hurt a lot of the other information, which was fantastic, that he was talking about. So where do you see this world heading? We're in a very trying times right now, politically, economically, socially, culturally, spiritually. I mean, I believe that we're in the forefront of spiritual warfare right now. Where do you see the world heading?
Oh, that's a deep question. I'm always, I call myself an eternal optimist. I practice positive thinking, you could say, and negative thinking, really, it's a lot of people fall for it and they get stuck, and that becomes their worldview, and the next thing you know, you're blackpilling every day, and then you're not getting anything done, because every thought that's toxic will create toxic blood effects as well, which leads to poor health and other things. In other words, your thoughts can make you sick if you're not careful. So part of the reason I'm an eternal optimist is because I've got too much fucking work to do than to sit around and worry about shit all day long. I'm hoping it's cool to cuss.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good deal. But yeah, I just think, humans are retarded for the most part. Not everybody, but humans in positions of power that really believe they're going to achieve a new world order, which is laughable in the face of cosmic truth, because they're violating universal law. And there's really, again, in Russell science, there's one law, the law of balance. And as Russell would say, to the degree someone violates that law is to the degree they will be broken by it.
Hmm.
And so we're seeing the breaking of this new world order in real time. And it's going to take a while to break. I don't like the fact that we're on the verge of global thermonuclear war. Again, what can we really do about it? People predicted the end of the world for thousands of years, and it's still here, guys. I mean, get busy, work on something productive that benefits your home, yourself, your neighborhood. You know, you got to achieve balance in your own life first. Whether or not the world goes to hell, you still have self work to do. You know, so my encouraging message to everybody is to find something inspirational. Turn the damn phone off and the TV, go out in nature and come up with an idea. 60 to 80,000 human thoughts a day. Which one are you going to hold and build a
Hmm.
body for? Right? Get busy, become a creator, co-create. And you better do it. And if you think that we're doomed, well, you better get started doing it, because it's at least better to have created something than nothing if the fucking planet explodes into another asteroid belt. You know, there could very well be an asteroid belt between Venus and Mars in the future. So what's stopping you from getting busy and enjoying life? Live every day as if it was the last, because it could very well be. But again, there's been many prophets, many predictors of this and that. I stay out of the prediction business for the most part. But I just do know too that as these people get exposed and more people are waking up, and potential for wake up has never been greater than it's ever been. It was a lonely time to be alive. And I know we talked about that in the past, Josh, back in 2001 and 2, when, you know, you're the only guy out of thousands of people that you might work with or know. And there's no one talking about 9/11 but you. They
Right.
all think you're out of your mind, you know. So at least today, you know, but again, don't keep an open mind so much that your damn brains fall out and that you start thinking, you know, that, oh, you know, Tataria, this, that, or the other. It's all interesting stuff, but be careful of the, let's just say, DARPA conspiracies that are funded by DARPA and pushed by DARPA, because a lot of people fall for this stuff. And I'll just say, you got to just be careful. But yeah, it's an interesting time to be alive. It always is, right? And again, I just think the human race is going to bust through this. We're gonna reborn the world. We're going to find our true power. It's pain and hard times and situations like this that born the best in us. And I'm just 100%, you know, focused on trying to better the world as best I can through the work I'm doing. And I thank you for doing the same. You know.
Yeah, brother, and thank you. And you know, it's interesting too because we got kind of a unique perspective from what's happening in the world. You know, we talk about these things on a daily basis in front of audiences. We get feedback from people. I got the social platform, so I hear from people all the time. And one thing I can tell you is that the world has absolutely changed in just the last 10 years. You know, people are now homesteading, people are going out and providing for themselves. They're producing local communities, they're creating parallel networks, which means that now they're eating local. Now they're eating, you know, real foods that are sourced locally. They're looking and taking care of their health because of the scare of pandemics and all these other things. They're learning the old traditional medicines that were prevalent before the 20th century, before the Flexner report and stuff like this. They're learning how to heal and cure themselves without allopathic medicine, without pharmaceuticals. So we have grown and we have changed as a culture because many of us, the majority, I think, are the never agains. We're never going to allow this to happen again, at least not within our generational time frame. Is that we've seen how horrible it can get. We've seen the boot to the neck. We've seen how unprepared we were for a world of tyranny, of which we had no control over, trying to even take back our freedom. And luckily, there was a few people in the world that stood up and they spoke out and they had mass popularity and they utilized various movements to get in positions of power and allowed the wake up of humanity over a short period of time before the agenda could truly take place, of which stopped it in its tracks. And so it's a beautiful thing. And I think that we've already changed.
Yeah, I do too. I couldn't agree more. And the amount of people that are homesteading, that conference with that Doug and Stacy put on had 2,000 people, not counting kids and
Wow.
and volunteers and speakers and all that stuff. So 2,000 people from all over the United States came to this thing, and I'm glad I got to film a little bit of it and make a little mini documentary out of it to try to help promote it and cross pollinate. And that's the power of the podcast too, is that I gained, I don't know how many followers and friends, in the movement for sovereignty and stuff from just being on your podcast. And I hope that my listeners will check out your work as well. And, also be proactive and get busy. And, Lori and I, my beloved, we're pretty well stocked. We got a freeze dryer. She's been freeze drying food for a couple years. And so we got a few years of food saved up, and it's little steps at a time. You just got to take little steps at a time. Don't try to make it all in one leap. Build up. You can be prepared by doing all kinds of different stuff. And just, also too, you got to have a good frame of mind, a healthy frame of mind. So make sure you're eating healthy food and avoiding the plastic, and all the crap, the different monster drinks. Monster is the Hebrew letters for 666. Stay
Yeah.
away from that stuff, guys. That stuff's poison. And, also talk with your body, listen to it because it's speaking to you. If it hurts, if it's not feeling good after you eat, don't eat that crap again. And we all have our times. I know I got my ice cream habit every once in a while. I got to have me some ice cream, right? But make sure it's good ice cream, not the high fructose corn syrup. Have your mental image when you go to the store, shop around the outside, stay in the meat, dairy, and produce section, stay out of the aisles if you can help it. If you do buy in the aisles, read the ingredients. I've been reading ingredients for 25 years. And I remember when I met Lori, she's like, "What are you doing?" First time we ever went to the store, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm reading like soup cans and different stuff. I'm like, "I ain't buying that no more." She's like, "What's wrong with that?" I'm like, "It's got MSG in it and high fructose corn syrup. I'm not eating that shit." She thought I was nuts, at first, but I changed my salt. I didn't eat white sugar. I stopped eating white table salt and switched to Himalayan. There's just all these little things you can do on a health level. When you get your health right, you'll be surprised at how more quickly you can learn, how more quickly you can apply yourself,
Hmm.
and how more creative you can get because you're actually making your vessel a repository for the Holy Spirit to live within. It becomes brighter. Your light and your volume of your light turns up. So these are things we can do. Your health, your state of mind. These are all mandatory things. And you prep a little bit, but you keep creative and you keep a positive mind and just keep pushing through the morass and not let it get you down. It doesn't mean don't feel what you feel. Feel your emotions, feel them all the way through. Feel your sadness. If you lose a loved one, feel it. Don't push it away and think, "Oh, it's okay." And you don't have to forgive somebody either, if you don't want to. These are all little things, tips and tricks that you can learn from just, reading and studying and psychology. Look into some psychology, some unslaved.com if you
There you
want.
go.
David Whitehead's tackling monster issues here for the truth. The Red Pill podcast. I mean, guys, this is all this. The best TV is on right now, and it's not the mainstream. The revolution will not be televised, and neither will your healthy mindset and a good creative lifestyle.
Spot on, brother. Spot on. Guys, if you want to visit Matt Presti, go on over to mattpresti.com. For everybody listening on the audio podcast, that's mattpresti.com. You can visit Matt over there and find all of his links up on social media. If you guys want to go get Walter Russell's books, really easy link for you to remember, redpills.tv/Walter, WALTER. And when you get over there, you're going to get a 20% discount if you use that code REDPILL20. Matt, we definitely got to connect with David Whitehead, get his ass on a show. He's got the dojo, so he's just been so busy with the dojo.
Yeah, he's what a great guy. I miss him. I miss, we had a marathon, the longest podcast I ever did, 4.5 hours
It's
a couple
awesome.
years back. That was just radical, man. That was great. Really great time.
Figured out the universe that whole episode.
We really did. And guys, I'll tell you what, yeah, couldn't ask for a better human being as a friend and a colleague in the effort. You know, we all bring skills and skill sets to the table, and everybody out there listening to this, you don't have to have a podcast to have a skill set. You've
Right.
got special abilities that are dormant, you know, and that's what I love about the work of the Russells, the home study course. It's literally a course on developing your special talents and working knowingly with God moment to moment so that you can crystallize your thoughts and freeze them into form in your own body creations. So it's out there. There's lots of great stuff out there, and I just hope that I can inspire people to get off the couch and put the phone down,
Right.
get busy doing some work. You know,
And they can find that under core curriculum. Is that correct?
that's correct. Yep.
So they get a core curriculum, and right there, home study course, third edition, right in there. And you guys can find that at redpills.tv/Walter. That'll take you to the shop over there, and you guys can check that out. Matt, oh man, always a pleasure, bro. Appreciate you so much. You take care. We're going to talk a little bit about what I was talking about. Hopefully we can get that planned, and I'll make an announcement if we can get that planned. And I'm pretty sure that some people want to be getting and going to that. For anybody out there who's wondering what I'm talking about, you have to join Fringe After Dark to learn. So Fringe After Dark is what happens after this show. So we go to socialredpill.com. You can go ahead and get a subscription over there, help support everything we do at the Red Pill Project. And we continue the conversation, myself and everybody else from the Red Pill Project. We're going to join in and talk about this night. So everybody's more than welcome to join. Just go over to socialredpill.com and I'll tell you guys what I was just talking about there with Matt. But much love, respect. God bless. Take care. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks.
Spoon, that's impossible. Only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.